Hey, and welcome to this week's coaching video for those of you who are going to be facilitating the discussion for your adult off-campus small group through Dayspring's ministry. If you're leading a small group for adults on the week of February the 8th, 2015, this video is designed to help you get ready to do that. So if you'll get your Going Deeper guide with you, you should have something that looks like this. It's dated February the 8th through 15th, 2015. I'm going to look at that with you. We're going to talk through it. It's going to get you ready to lead your group time this week, all right? Now, here's pretty much what this discussion is all about to kind of get you acclimated with where this thing is headed. This Sunday in church, we're going to be talking about, we're still talking about life on mission and how the church has been commissioned with Jesus to extend the gospel to every man, woman, and child. Well, in order to do that, if we're going to advance the mission of God, we can't just mobilize ourselves to come into contact with every man, woman, and child. We have to mobilize people who are developing spiritually to come into contact with every man, woman, and child. So it's not just enough to mobilize ourselves and to see to it that every man, woman, and child comes into access with the people who are called the church. We have to be mobilizing the kind of people through whom the gospel can clearly be seen and heard. So spiritual growth is a very, very important part of the process. People need to see the gospel through us. Now, what you're going to look at in this discussion guide, you're basically going to look at this and you're going to say, what kinds of things do people need to see in me that would create a curiosity on their end to explore our faith? What kinds of things do people need to witness in my life that might cause them to say, I'm curious about what they believe and why they believe it? That's what this lesson is all about. All right. So if you'll look at your handout, let's go through it. Let's go through it a bit by bit here. Discussion point number 1 is your recap question. This is how you always start on your Sunday, always start on your small group time by recapping and discussing what you saw on Sunday. And you see on this one, it points you to the passage that we studied on Sunday, and then it says talk about it and use your notes if you need to. So of course, as a small group facilitator, you need to take good notes on Sunday so that you can get things going here. Now, discussion point number 2, this is everything that you're going to discuss from here on really springboards off discussion point number 2. So let's make sure you understand where this one's headed. It says to read 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 15 together. Now, you're going to read that to your group, and it should sound very familiar to you. It should sound familiar to your whole group because it was our church-wide memory verse 2 weeks ago. It says, always be prepared to give an answer to anyone who asks you to give a reason for the hope that you have. Now, as you look at that and as you hear that, probably what you're hearing is that we always need to be ready to articulate our faith. And that's right. But there's an assumption that's being made in this verse. Look back at your handout. It says, now read this verse again carefully and notice that there's an assumption that we'll be asked to explain our hope. And that's exactly what the verse says. It says, always be prepared to give an answer to anyone who asks you to explain your faith. It's pretty much what it's saying. So the assumption is that we're living in such a way that there is a curiosity that is created, that people have an interest in what it is that we believe because they're witnessing something that causes them to say, I must explore that person's faith. I must explore whatever it is that's at the core of this person over here because they have a hope, the kind of hope that I would like to have. So there's an implication there, and you'll just simply discuss that and talk that through. But I don't want you to miss that. Always be prepared to give an answer to anyone and everyone who asks you to give a reason for the hope that you have. So obviously the implication is that we ought to be living in such a way that causes people to come up to us and say, what is it about what you believe? Because there's something there that I think I may want to have as well. All right. So now from there, look at discussion point number 3. It says a question we should ask is this: what could someone see in my life that would prompt them to investigate my faith? So if people should indeed be wanting to investigate my faith, what are the kinds of things that they need to see that would cause them to do that? This handout gives you 3 different things, and you've kind of got them point by point here, all right? So here's the answer to that question. What kinds of things ought to be seen in my life that might cause someone to want to explore my faith? Here's the first one, discussion point number 4. Others need to see me practicing my faith and practicing it well. You've got a verse there that you'll read from the Apostle Paul where you see that he allowed people to witness his faith. In other words, this is why Paul could say, and you can find this in your New Testament. I won't give you the verse. See if you can find it. But Paul told the Christians in the New Testament, he said, follow me, because when you do, you'll be following Christ. In other words, there were times where he was following Christ well, and he was intentionally making sure that Christians were seeing what that looked like. So think about this. When we're saying what might cause someone to investigate my faith, here's the whole thing you're trying to get at here in discussion point number 4. Ask your group, where are some arenas in your life where really the gospel is being seen pretty well? Could it be that your family is functioning in a very holistic way? Is that a healthy thing to witness? Do you have a recreational thing that you're involved in with other Christians where you're doing it in a kind of a countercultural way where the gospel is actually being put on display there? Where is it in your life? Where's that arena where you can say, you know what, without bragging, I can say that I'm following Christ here. I think Jesus can be seen in this. The point in all of this is that we need to invite people into those arenas with us. You know, if you have a family that functions well and you love each other and you get along, invite an outsider into dinner. Let them witness that. If you play on a team like that where, even though it's a kind of a thing where tempers usually flare and people get out of control, but your group is different than that, invite an outsider in to participate with you. Let them witness that. The point is this. If people see that kind of a thing happening in our lives, they see us practicing our faith in a good way, we need to invite them into those arenas because that might cause them to say, what's the deal with you? What's the deal with whatever is helping you be calm? Why does your family seem to get along? If people witness that, it might cause them to ask about the hope that we have. That's number 1. But here's a second thing, and I think really all of these go together. It's not like a one or the other. I think it's in all 3. Here's number 2. Look at discussion point number 5. People need to see us practice our faith in hard times. And then you've got a passage there where the Apostle Paul talks about hardship and all of those things. And here's the hypothetical question that this discussion point throws out, and I want you to throw this one out there to them. Imagine that you are a person who has no faith persuasion. You're irreligious, but you're curious about God. You're not opposed to being a person of faith, but you're not there yet. And you know a person who claims to have a God, maybe not the God, but it's a God. They claim to have a God. And you see them in the good times of their life, and they praise their God, and they're, walking close with their God and all of these things. But then you witness them in the difficult times. And in the difficult times, they don't lean on their God. They don't trust in their God. Now, here's the hypothetical question. If you're exploring a legitimate faith and a legitimate system to believe in, is that the faith system that you're going to say, hey, maybe that's one that's for me? I mean, if you see somebody who can trust God when things are good, but can't trust God when things are bad, is that really a God worth pursuing? I would say no. I mean, what kind of value is that kind of a God? So here's the point. If we want to have the kind of faith that's going to prompt people to come to us and explore our faith and to inquire about our faith and to investigate our faith, they need to see a faith not only where we're doing things, knocking it out of the park in those good arenas, but they also need to see us walking closely with God and interacting with God in the difficult times. That's the kind of thing that might prompt them to ask about the hope that we have. There's a third thing. You see this on discussion point number 6. And this is, I think this is a very insightful point here. That people need to see us restored after we sin against God. There's a degree with which we need to include people in our failures. Because oftentimes, here's what we do. Oftentimes what we do is we act like that maybe there's nothing wrong with us, that we've kind of got it all together. And if somebody believes that, then it just seems like, what's the hope? I can't be like them because they know they're not like that. On the other hand, sometimes we act like we've got it all together and people know that we really don't. And so you know what label they put on us? Hypocrite. So my point is this. If we act like we don't have sin in our lives and junk in our lives that have to be dealt with, people either think that we're just cut from a different swath than they are, or they just think we're hypocrites. But what if there was a third type of option here? What if what they saw was a Christian who did fail their God, but their God forgave them, and their God restored them, and their God renewed them? Now, I'm going to tell you, as an outsider looking in, if that were me, if I were an outsider looking in, and I saw that someone had a God who didn't kick them to the curb when they sinned, but restored them and forgave them and renewed them and healed them of their, their sin problem, that would get my attention. So when you look at this outline that you've been given, what we're doing is we're starting with 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 15, and saying, okay, so people ought to be investigating our faith. What do they need to see that might cause them to do that? Well, if they see us doing things well with our faith, if they see us trusting God in the difficult times, and if they see us still interacting with God when we sin, that might just do it. So that's what this discussion is all about. One thing that you may want to explore there on discussion point number 6 is to ask the question, when you're talking about really inviting people into your world to see you overcome sin in your life, you may want to investigate you may want to dialogue as a group to say, how far do we take that? I mean, how far in do we let people see? Are there any parameters? Are there any, fences that we need to put there? That'd be a good thing to discuss. See what kind of answers you come up with. But the bottom line is this. If people are going to ask us about the hope that we have, they're going to have to see something that's worth investigating. And what you have here are 3 things, especially if they see all 3 of these things in our lives, that might just cause them to come up to us and say, hey, I want to ask you about God and stuff. And when they do, then we need to be ready to give them an answer for the hope that we have. You've got a closing discussion point there on your guide, the very last one, and that encourages you to pray for one another. And hopefully by now, as we keep moving through this Life on Mission emphasis, you're starting to accumulate a list of names that you're praying for, of people who are still on the outside of faith, that you're praying for them to come in and to believe alongside us and with us. All right, so you can finish with that, or you can finish after that by looking at your memory verse together. But either way, I think this is going to be a good discussion guide for you as we continue to press forward as to what it looks like to live our lives on mission. All right, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening in. God bless you, and we'll see you Sunday.